to another episode of Wizard Goes Boom. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about old school sandbox style play. Back in 1979 and 1980, Gary Gygax had laid out the formula for a sandbox style campaign, with T1 The Village of Hamlet and B2 Keep on the Borderlands. The formula itself is pretty simple. You have a home base for your player characters where they can get all the necessary equipment, at least for first through third level, and where they can get some tidbits of adventure, some plot hooks like rumors from a tavern. And nearby you would have some sort of dungeon, not too far away from the home base, so it would be easy for the players to bring back their treasure hoard that they found from the dungeon back to the home base. In B2, Keep on the Borderlands, it was the Caves of Chaos. And in T1, The Village of Hamlet, it was the Old Moat House. And as the sandbox style campaign name implies, that players are free to do as they please. They're not on rails. There's no overarching meta plot to keep them in a railroad kind of situation. There's not really a big bad evil guy taking over the world that requires immediate attention. Although, interestingly enough, the same year, roughly 1979, Gary Gygax introduced the GDQ Adventure Path Against the Giants, the Drow series, and the Queen of the Demon Web Pits. That storyline kind of railroaded players. But that adventure also assumed that player characters were also roughly name level when they got started with it. So it all seems quite interesting. The sandbox, wow. Your players can do whatever they want, and you can mostly sit back and don't have to DM too much. You're just kind of refereeing what's going on. Sounds great in theory. Personally, I'm all for it, but I've heard of criticisms of the sandbox style of play. One criticism is that it's very similar to a quest bulletin board that you find as a trope in many anime series, where you go join the Adventurers Guild, and there you go, you have a board on the wall with various quests. And usually those quests have something to do with go fetch this or go rescue that. So one way to avoid that sort of quest board is to introduce factions into your sandbox. Even in Keep on the Borderlands, in the Caves of Chaos, there's various factions of humanoids. So you don't have to fight all of them. There's a way around it. You can make temporary alliances with some of them, or get them to fight amongst each other. That really is the beauty of the sandbox campaign, is that you have multiple ways of resolving an issue. It doesn't have to always come to combat, which is one of the problems with railroaded adventures. Nothing against railroaded adventures. There's some very good ones out there. But more often than not, the solution comes down to combat. And if you recall, Old School D&D was pretty deadly. So oftentimes you had to find ways around fighting. So in addition to different adventure hooks like rumors that pop up in a tavern, let's say, you could also have factions. One example I can think of is Barrow Maze from Greg Gillespie. It's a huge mega dungeon, and inside that mega dungeon there's different factions of cultists. Now, you don't have to fight them all. You can pit them against each other. You can temporarily ally yourself with one of them against the other. But it adds a different layer to the plot. It makes it different than go fetch this and go rescue that. There could be warring factions in the hometown, the home base for the PCs. It could be at the dungeon. The factions can be in both. And it's through the PC's interactions with these factions that really drive the story, as opposed to side quests where it's just like go fetch, go rescue, or go kill. Another interesting feature about sandboxes, especially at lower levels, is that it's not completely a sandbox. There are boundaries to the sandbox. For example, it would be unwise for the players to venture outside of that safe area of the town. And yes, they can go to the dungeon, but outside of that sphere, you're talking about some very dangerous creatures. So while in Old School in the dungeon, the levels of the dungeon roughly translated to the level your players are at for a little bit of balance, wilderness encounters were far more deadly because there's no expected balance. So you generally don't have to worry about the players ignoring your plot hooks for too long. It's highly unlikely that they would decide to venture outside the safe area. In Hamlet, the various factions were usually members of the old religion versus the new, such as St. Cuthbert. And then another faction would be agents of the Temple of Elemental Evil. And they all operate in the town. So if the players start getting bored of whatever they pick up at a tavern from the rumors, they can pursue the different factions. That way they can get involved in a little bit of intrigue and maybe a little bit of politics. And that's where the real immersion of a sandbox is. Getting involved within the politics and faction play of their home base. So it's kind of like what I spoke about in a previous video regarding D&D as a war game and strongholds. Strongholds being the introduction to high-level play. And players should get a sort of taste for that at lower levels by interacting with the various factions, with the introduction to local politics and possibly a grander scale of politics later on down the line. I remember roughly 30 to 40 years ago, not long after I first started playing with sandboxes, it wouldn't take long for my adventuring party to kind of come into the ire of the Thieves Guild, for example. The local Thieves Guild, we stepped on their toes, and of course they sent their agents after us. It's part of the intrigue that you can get involved in. And if it's not the Thieves Guild, it could be some other group. It could be the Assassins. Depends on who's operating in the town. You could even step on the toes of cultists or even the law and the powers that be in the town. Now, the one thing I would definitely stress when running a sandbox is after maybe level 1, I would start to introduce factions. Because usually the first level, maybe 2, it'll be those side quest kind of things that you pick up rumors about in a tavern. And it'll be those simple, go fetch this, go rescue that, go kill this. So really it should be around level 2 to 3 that you introduce or start introducing factions. I can't stress that enough, especially for the immersion of it. Get the players involved in the safe haven's politics. Maybe there's politics that involve the dungeon as well. And when they're ready to go and move to another town, when the characters are higher level, they'll get involved in a bigger scale of politics and intrigue. And you'll notice that in a lot of early modules, especially ones written by Gary Gygax, there's plenty of factions. Well, thank you everyone for watching today. Appreciate your time, and I hope you all have a great day.